Hello friends, today we will discuss about what is news. Human beings are always keen to know something new, rare, unique, exceptional, matchless, interesting, and so on and so forth. They are curious and inquisitive by nature. They are always looking for information about anything and everything that interests and attracts them. This has been over the ages gone by and from time immemorial. Most of the medium of mass communication have by and large been instrumental in satisfying the curiosities of human beings. Newspapers and magazines, books, internet, radio, television, and several other mass media have been endeavoring to gather information and disseminate them to the people looking for such informations. The most important need that media fulfill is of providing news, latest news from the place one is located, news of region, news of nation, and of course the world, the globe, the universe, the microcosm. It is hence very clear that the most important input that anyone is looking for from a mass media is what is meant by news. For that we must understand the concept, meaning, definitions, and an overview of news. Broadly speaking, news is anything that report of an event that has just taken place. News is details of information, descriptions, depictions, definitions, delineation, narration, a statement, an occurrence which is recent, new, fresh, or unknown. In accordance with the words of George Hogg of the University of Georgia, USA, quote, "News is both a product and point of view. As a product, news is gathered, processed, packaged, and sold by newspapers, news services, news magazines, radio, television, cable stations, and networks." Unquote. George Hogg again adds and remarks, quote, "News is also whatever people think. What a reporter or an editor finds interesting or exciting or important for the people is news. Hence, news is something that interests, excites, or concerns people. News only interests people, but at times excites and at times concerns them. This is simple because it may be a mishap or an accident or a tragedy or a natural calamity. News creates good times, excellent times, great times. It may create bad times, difficult times, or indifferent times. Now, what is the meaning of news? When you ask 10 newspaper persons to tell you the meaning of news, you are most likely to get 11 meanings of news. News is in fact one of the most important items in today's world. All those who understand a language and who have access to mass media understands the meaning of a news. As a matter of fact, the concept of news was born when man was born and shall survive as long as man survives. Hence, it must have existed even before the beginning of an era of mass media or mass communication. You may find relics of an old system in a remotest village where people exchange local news during market hours just by interacting with each other. When two brothers meet after some time, they often share useful information which may be described as personal news. Similarly, when two friends or relatives write letter to each other, it may be described as news by them. This type of news sharing has been there since time immemorial. We all agree to the point that death makes an important news, and the importance of this news relates to the importance of the person. Pranab Mukherjee, veteran Congress leader and former President of Republic of India, died on 31st August at the age of 84. It was a big news. Man on Moon is another big news. Man on Mars, another big news. This news was important due to the importance of planets or pranabda. But even at an ordinary death of a person will make news, at least for those who know him and are related to him. It may not be published in a newspaper or any other media, but it will be definitely a news for some people. Hence, we may conclude that the concept of news in our society is as old as the recognition of death as an event and its communication to those whom the event would affect. Before the advent of mass media, news was communicated by the word of mouth. Though the concept of news is as old as mankind, as I have already told, yet the word news is relatively recent in its origin. In English, it appeared as news in 1423, News in 1485, and evolved to news in 1523. But it was only after 1550 that it became news, N-E-W-S. The meaning of news is often described as the representation of four directions: north, east, west and south. Because N for north, E for east, W for west and S for south. But news may come from many other directions. It can come from 10 directions. And as we see every day, all events don't make news. So all informations coming from north, east, west, south or 10 directions as described may not be news. Only relevant, concerning, important, interesting events make news. All information is not news. All news is information, but all information is not news. So news is an integral part of information. It is a subset of information, and information is a superset of news. Moreover, an event itself is not news. It becomes news if and only if its account is available. Thus, Sushant Singh Rajput's death made a big news several weeks after the events. When sometimes a very controversial budget is presented, then it is discussed for months also. History is also an account of several case studies and important events, but it pertains primarily to the past events. News is nothing but timely and current history. Today's newspaper will be the source material for the historians of tomorrow, as today's historians consult newspapers of yesterdays in the archives. What is occurring today may be recorded in the history, but its account which newspapers or media give is news because of its newsworthiness. Not only events but opinions also make news. Opinion of the Indian Prime Minister or US President about world peace and terrorism makes news of international order. The opinion of the man on the street about the union budget or about their favorite leaders or their stars makes news. Coverage and analysis of Indian Prime Minister or President in the foreign newspapers will make important news in India. What the UK press published about the Lok Sabha elections in India may be hot news for the Indian newspapers. What the US press wrote about Abhishek Aishwarya marriage was news for the Indian newspapers. Hence, the other meaning of news may be like this, quote, news is an account of recent event or opinion which is important or interesting or concerning. Importance, interest and concern are the three factors that depict a lot of varieties and hence explain why an event is newsworthy for one newspaper or broadcasting stations and not for many other newspapers and radio or TV networks. Why the press in India publishes more about UK or US than our own villages. Why one news item becomes an international news while the other is suitable only for a local or regional newspapers. So let us define news in a proper way. We all are aware of the famous quotation by John B. Bogart of United Kingdom. He defined news: when a dog bites a man, it is not a news, but when a man bites a dog, it becomes a news. There are several other definitions of news which we may just go through and we can discuss it later, we can analyze it later. News is something which is revealed. News is something which somebody wants suppressed. News is anything you didn't know yesterday. News is any event, idea or opinion that is timely, that interests or affects a large number of people in a community and that is capable of being understood by them. Again quote, news is what the newspaper prints and radio broadcasts. Another definition, news is a compilation of facts and events of current interest or importance to the readers of the newspaper printing it. Sex, money, crime, that is all news. Again quote, another definition, news is anything and everything interesting about life and materials in all their manifestation. Yet another definition, what is new is news. News means new, new and new. News is anything out of the ordinary. News is anything published in newspaper which interests large number of people. Another definition, news is what newspaper people make. Yet another concept, good news is not news. Yet another definition, news is anything a big shot said, a big personality states. News and truth are not the same thing. Another definition, the function of news is to signal an event. News is any recent, up-to-date information of an event received from the different directions. News is a history in a hurry. News is the honest and unbiased and complete account of events of interest and concern to the public. Another definition, news may be defined as an accurate fact or idea that will interest a large number of readers. Unquote. Again, a new definition, News is anything timely that is interesting and significant to the readers in respect of their personal affairs or their relation to the society, and the best news is that which possesses the greatest degree of this interest and significance for the greatest number. News may be defined as an accurate, unbiased account of significant factors of a timely happening that is of interest to the readers of the newspapers that print the account. News is the first report of the significant events which have interest for the people. News is an account of the current idea, event, or problem that interests people. News is a record of the most interesting, important, and accurate information obtainable about the things man thinks and says, sees, describes, plans, and does. Former editor of Indian Express, Arun Suri, defines news as, quote, when someone somewhere is trying to hide something, that is news, and all other things are advertisement, unquote. According to the former editor-in-chief of the Hindustan Times, Mr. B.G.Verghese, he says, quote, the standard definition that only man bites dog is news is obsolete and inaccurate now. That means he has countered the concept given by John B. Bogart that man biting a dog makes news. In view of the communication, as he says, in view of the communication gap in a democratic society, which is that which is reported becomes news and that which is not reported remains non-news. Sensationalization, disaster, fraud, and the like is news, but it is not quote sole news or the highest news. Verghese cogently argues that reporting of more constructive developments and trends in great social, economic, and political changes, technological advances, modernization of processes, rather than concentrating only on political news, unquote. Now, a well-known American editor, Stanley Walker, defines news as, quote, news is more unpredictable than the winds. An eminent and legendary American editor, Joseph Pulitzer, has defined news as, quote, original, distinctive, romantic, thrilling, unique, curious, quaint, humorous, odd, and apt to be talked about, unquote. So this was the definition given by Joseph Pulitzer. Hence, it is proved that no two newspapers look at news in an identical manner. In modern times, journalism professionals, news persons, and media personalities are most likely to define news in terms of what people, readers, listeners, viewers want to know. That is, whether it is local news, a national event, or war and peace. No news interests all. Without consciously realizing it, most people love to read only that part of the newspaper they purchase which interests them. In other words, their perception and hence their reading is highly selective in nature. Hence, we may define news as something uncommon, unusual, unroutine, divergent, having public interest with freshness. Here, freshness is equally important as today's newspaper is a best paper for tomorrow.